Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are about to get the 2033 to 2034 offseason underway. Appreciate all of the feedback over the past couple episodes, all of the ideas and thoughts that viewers have sent my way in the comments. Definitely helped us come up with what we hope will be a pretty good plan on how to move this team forward to hopefully make the playoffs for a fifth time in 6 seasons next year, despite a couple of pretty significant departures that our team is going to have via free agency this offseason. We'll start off the episode by following up on some of the things that we talked about in detail last time around. We did end up promoting Dave Bush to become our pitching coach at the major league level, and actually we promoted all 5 of the pitching coaches in our organization. We promoted a couple of hitting coaches as well. So although we are looking for 5 new coaches in our organization at this point, they are all in high A ball or rookie ball. So we'll be turning over the coaching staffs of those teams a bit this offseason, but the rest of the organization is filled with people who have been with us 5 to 10 years in most cases, proven themselves, and generally have pretty solid relationships with the rest of our organization. And we've made a number of offers to minor leaguers in our organization, along with the big contract we talked about last time to Jackson Ferris. We have subsequently put ourselves in a position where we've made a arbitration offer to the young starting pitcher Jamie DeVore. And perhaps most interestingly, and with the most upside, we've got an 8-year offer for close to $18 million to the middle infielder Andy Toribio. 26 years old, and he just made his major league debut at the end of last year. Only his 14 career major league at-bats. But looking at his profile, we think in a worst case scenario, he is a really good utility infielder. And we're still holding out some hope that with his decent speed, decent ability to make contact, and his durability, that he might be more than just a utility infielder for us. And right now, he's actually penciled in as our starting shortstop for next year. So if he ends up becoming a starting quality major league shortstop, he could end up being a really great bargain for us. And taking some hopefully well thought out and educated risks on some of the contracts we've offered to very young players with very little experience has been, I don't want to say a secret weapon, but it certainly has been part of our arsenal here in recent years with the A's, and we're hoping that perhaps Mr. Toribio could follow in the footsteps of some of those other contracts that have worked out well for us over the years. You think about Luis Lara, you think about Tyler Soderstrom in the early stages of his contract before we traded him away, Mason Miller, more recently Jake Ortega. We've had Jason DeCaro, before that Bubba Chandler. We've taken a lot of gambles. They haven't all worked out perfectly with some of these contract offers that we've made to younger players, but in general, we've gotten some surplus value compared to what we've paid those guys, and hopefully it will be a similar situation with Mr. Toribio. And apologies if you've been hearing an obnoxious bird in the background, but the nights here, the evenings here, are actually getting a bit cooler now, so I had opened up the windows and turned off the air conditioning after it was warm during the day in the house, and unfortunately some jerk bird decided to just be cawing incessantly outside my window, flying around, so apologies if that was bothering you in the early moments of this episode, but hopefully we won't be hearing from him anytime soon. Couple other things to touch upon before we get the episode moving forward. I did make a significant change to the development lab, and the change was that I expanded it to 10 players from 8. I've been running 8 throughout this playthrough, and given that it's the first year of the development lab, I know and I think many of you are still trying to figure out more about it. I figured it made sense to add a couple additional spots. I'm starting to develop what I think are some theories on how to be as successful as possible in the development lab, and certainly having another couple spots will give me 25% more data to kind of think about as I try to figure out what's the best approach. Did make a change to a few programs, added in Shiloh Solis and Sergio Gravedigger Palomares with quality of contact programs for those two prospects. Doug Weiss will be adding a pitch to his arsenal, or attempting to. I know several of you are interested in that. And we did end up going with Bertrand the Dominator Albrighton to see if we can generate some bat speed there and really move his home run power forward. I know some of you are of the opinion that it's probably time for us to pull the plug on our multi-year fascination with trying to develop the Dominator to actually be a Dominator at the major league level, and this will probably be our last attempt with him. So the program that we had kind of talked about doing that we haven't done with the 10 spots that we have is getting Mr. Toribio into the development lab to work on his defense. But we will have an opportunity to do that with him, as well as many other players, in the month after these longer programs are completed come late winter. And we have also made 2 trades since our last episode. I don't think either of these is going to be shocking to those of you who have followed our thoughts closely over the past few episodes. But we did deal our second baseman with a captain personality, Justin LeBron, who is set to make about $4.5 million in arbitration next year, as well as Henry Lelane, a really good left-handed pitcher who can start or relieve, who is set to make about $6 million next year. And we got a nice chunk of cash in return from the Cubs, in addition to catcher Chris Laughlin. I don't love him, but being realistic about what he is, he's a switch-hitting catcher with pretty solid defense, who over the course of 224 major league at-bats has put up a 95 WRC plus. So I think he could be a pretty useful catcher for us over the next few years. I'm not really sure whether Laughlin or last year's rookie Jaden Boakai will be our starter next year, but I think that adding Laughlin into the mix improves our catcher room, given that we were unlikely to bring Drake Baldwin back, and it also frees up a lot of money for us with the move that we made. So LeBron and Lelane gone, got some cash in return, and also got the young catcher Chris Laughlin. We also made another big move with some valuable veterans. Minor league catcher Ken Weaver, who's been up with us a couple times over the last 3 seasons, is a guy who was going to be out of options after this year. And I don't think he's quite as good as Laughlin. His bat, in particular, I think is just a notch worse, although he is also a switch hitter, also a pretty respectable defensive catcher. But I like Laughlin better, so given that we were going to have to get Weaver through waivers next year, using him as trade bait and clearing up a spot on the 40-man roster by including him in the trade made sense to me. And we also moved on from our starting catcher last year, and that means that Toribio at this point is going to get the shot. Maui Ahuna was one of two players with a team option that we were needing to make a decision on this current offseason, and want to give Toribio an opportunity. We think his bat will be better than Ahuna's, even though his defense is probably a little bit worse. He's also not fragile as far as his injury proneness. And Ahuna, with the good contract that we were able to sign him to last offseason, actually had some decent value. We got Elliot Bonello from the Cleveland organization. This is a guy who we've been kind of looking at closely for about a year. He was a bit above average offensively in his rookie season with Cleveland this year. Like him as a left-handed bat for our lineup, a pretty good corner outfielder, good influence in the clubhouse. He is fragile physically, so certainly not a perfect candidate for us, but someone who's not making a ton of money. We also got a lot of cash in return, and I actually took much less than what I could have gotten. It was kind of a weird thing. Cleveland is in a rebuilding mode, and they had a ton of money to spend this offseason. And I think they just realized they weren't going to be spending it on players, most likely. So I think that made them willing to just give stupid amounts of cash in this deal. And granted, they were getting a pretty good major league shortstop in Ahuna and a potential useful major league catcher in Weaver as well. But I was actually able to get, I think, like $21.5 million in cash in this deal if I wanted to, which just seemed ridiculous. I mean, honestly, taking $10 million back might be aggressive as well. But, you know, it's only money that we're going to have for this one season. It'll certainly help us prop up our scouting and player development budgets. But since it's not something that's going to repeat, not going to be particularly useful in terms of becoming big players in free agency. So just kind of threw in a house rule there as picking up, like I said, well over $20 million in cash in return for this trade seemed excessive to me. I mean, honestly, $10 million seems real high to me, but when I cut it by more than 50%, I figured at least trying to manage the situation responsibly here. And we still have another trade brewing, and this last trade will probably be the most expensive one for us if it ends up happening. We're looking, as we have a few times over the course of this series, and trying to bolster our starting pitching. We're scouting a few guys who are kind of in their mid-20s that we think could be pretty useful pitchers for us. I don't really see any of these guys as aces. I think, you know, in a best-case scenario, they're kind of number twos. Realistically, they're probably more number threes. But there's a few prospects out there that the prices in the trade market, while high, are not crippling. So we're going to hopefully get some scouting reports that are updated back on some of these starting pitching prospects over the next week or so of game time. And maybe we will be working on another trade when all is said and done before we move on too far in this episode. Last but not least, kind of a weird situation for us with the fact that we traded away both Mr. LeBron and Lelane. We only have one arbitration-eligible player this year. Mentioned that we've already made the offer to DeVore. We've got the offer out to Jackson Ferris, and then we've submitted qualifying offers to both Chase Burns and Kyle Manzardo, and honestly would love it if either of them actually accepted the qualifying offer, because we now kind of do have money for this one upcoming year because of those trades that we made. I don't think either of them actually will exercise the qualifying offer, and they'll probably both hit free agency, but not really a lot of fear if they do that, given the fact that we just picked up close to $15 million in the two trades that we made that we'll have to use for this upcoming season although not past that point. So that is kind of the lay of the land here as we're about to get the offseason underway. I'm going to be spending a little more time talking about some of the award winners than I normally do this offseason. YME943 wanted me to share a little more information about some of the big stars in the game, particularly the stars who at this point are randomly generated rather than players we are familiar with in real life, given that real life is now almost a decade ago at this point. So we're going to be spending a little more time on some of the award winners this year than normal. But other than that, I think we're just going to try to get through salary arbitration and to the start of free agency in this episode. So really just going to be moving forward a few weeks. Hopefully we'll find out what happens with those contract offers that we made to Ferris and to Toribio. And maybe we'll be trying to put a trade together for a youngish starting pitcher to bolster the depth of our rotation, given that we will, in all likelihood, be losing our number 2 starter, Chase Burns, who was our biggest winner last year with a 14-7 record. And Jackson Ferris quickly signed that contract with us, so he will be back for potentially the next 5 years in an Oakland uniform. The fans are excited. We had actually bumped up fan interest 1 point from 58 to 59 when we brought Mr. Bonello on board. I don't know if we've shown that yet. It looks like we picked up another point to 60 with the addition, or more accurately, the return of Mr. Ferris for next season. So probably going to be losing some points in fan interest, particularly when Kyle Manzardo and potentially Chase Burns move on from our team. So good that we at least got a little bit of a boost in fan interest from a couple of these recent transactions. And we also got Jamie DeVore signed, so we won't be going to arbitration. And Andy Toribio signed his contract as well. So pretty reasonable money for the next few years. He'll be making more than the minimum for these next few seasons. And if he works out well, it's going to be a great contract for us. But he's also a 26-year-old who's played in a handful of career major league games at this point, and he's just guaranteed himself financial security. So hopefully this will be a deal that ends up being a win-win for both of us. We've got 4 of our coaches signed. Unfortunately, 2 of the coaches, a manager and a pitching coach, that we were looking to have hopefully bolster our staff in our Arizona team, are the openings that we've been unable to fill so far. Offline, I've already increased the offers to both of them once. They've both just come back and said that they've got another offer from another team that they prefer. My history with that is that players or coaches like that are pretty difficult to actually sign. I'm offering them already pretty sick money, well into 6 figures, to be coaches of this rookie league team. So my hunch is they actually have better offers at a higher level of an organization from another team. So probably going to have to pivot to plan B for a couple of the coaching vacancies that we still have open here in this 2033 offseason. And over the last couple of days, we've gotten the scouting reports back on the pitchers that I mentioned we may look to put together a trade for. One of these guys, I'll take a quick look at the 4 pitchers that we've zeroed in on that, although the prices will be expensive, probably can be attainable for us. One is Gabe Brewster. He's listed as a closer for the White Sox right now, but does have a 4-pitch arsenal, albeit that curveball is not particularly effective, and enough stamina to start. He's a fan favorite, throws in the mid to high 90s. He's likely to give up a fair amount of home runs. Fly ball pitcher with below average ability to keep the ball in the park. Only has 1 year of major league experience. This past year with Chicago, he was 1-5 with a 6.34 ERA. So not off to a particularly incredible start in his career. And you see he was actually a Rule 5 draft pick from the loaded Royals organization for the White Sox just last offseason. Brewster has one of the lower prices of this crew of pitchers, but you can see in a straight-up deal, we're going to have to give a very important major league player or one of the top prospects in our organization. The hope is that if Brewster or any of these other guys are the direction we decide to go, we'll be able to put a package of several players together without necessarily stripping one of the top prospects out of our system or losing one of the top players on our major league roster. Second pitcher we're looking at is Mike Wimmer, starting pitcher from the Rockies organization. He's actually got 3 years of major league experience right now, and they've actually signed him to a pretty big extension since we started scouting him a few days ago. So he's probably a less realistic target for us now, because I think we would have been inclined to try to manage him through his arbitration years, but think that he could be or could have been a pretty interesting guy for us to pick up. But you can see right now we've got no one who makes this deal work. If we were to add in at this point our highest rated prospect, Arturo Uresti, we'd be over budget. That's why nobody works. We just don't have the money to make this work now. Yeah, although we've got cash available, as I mentioned, we can potentially use some of the cash that we picked up for scouting and player development going forward, but it looks like we've got some limits on how much payroll we're going to really be able to add, unfortunately. So Wimmer apparently is not going to work, because you can see that extension that he's been signed to for 2035. The season after this coming one is too much for us to be able to afford at this point. So although we got the money here, the fact that Wimmer's now not on a year-to-year deal means that he is no longer a realistic target for us. Chris Slater, another guy that we are considering. This guy is a reliever from the Yankees organization, would not be a potential starter. But love that change-up cutter combo that he's got. Really good stuff, plus movement and plus control. Only been in the majors for a little over a year and has put up a sub-3 ERA in both of his first 2 seasons as a reliever in the Yankees organization. The only guy that we can get him straight up for is Jackson Ferris, so the price for him is really high. But think that Slater, if we end up moving our young pitcher Levi Sterling into a stopper role rather than the starting and closing roles that he had for us this past year, Sterling as a stopper with a guy like Slater as a closer would be a pretty impressive back end of our bullpen. But the price may be just a little bit too high. The last guy is in some ways the most interesting, but in some ways the most concerning as well. Mike Lambert from the Tampa organization, 25 years old, was 6-2 with a 3.07 ERA this past season. Guy that they picked in the 3rd round out of Eastern Michigan just a couple of years ago. Clearly, you look at how he's developed, and wish we would have had the foresight to have picked him. Don't love that he's outspoken in terms of his personality type, but think he's a guy with plus stuff, plus movement, and potentially plus control, as well as 4 good, solid major league pitchers, decent stamina, decent at holding on runners. Even though he does have that outspoken personality, he does bring some positive personality traits into the clubhouse. Trade-wise, Lambert, Uresti is the only guy that we can get straight up for him. So it's going to be expensive to get a deal done with any of these guys. I think if we're going for a starter, though, it's obviously going to be Lambert or potentially converting Brewster to a starter at this point. Unfortunate that Wimmer's kind of off limits to us now, and I think although Slater could be a fallback option, as good as I think he is as a potential closer, I'd rather go with a guy, if we're going to spend a lot of resources, who could potentially pitching 160, 180, 200 plus innings for us as a starter. And we've got a trade that we put together to bring Lambert into our organization. I liked Lambert because I think he's going to do a better job of not giving up the long ball. And if he does develop the last little bit of control that we think he can, he's a guy who's a little bit above average at everything with a 4-pitch arsenal, good stamina, good at holding on runners, and some positive personality traits despite that outspoken personality class. Also would give us a second lefty in the rotation, joining the recently signed Mr. Ferris, and it would certainly allow us to see what we've got with Levi Sterling potentially this next season in a stopper role, and then when presumably we're moving on from Mason Miller after this upcoming 2034 season, we could still obviously pivot Mr. Sterling back into the rotation if we decided that's what made sense. But the price for Lambert is going to be very expensive. We are getting the best player in the deal, but we're giving up 3 useful assets plus a guy to get him on board. The guy is the veteran pitcher, Drew Rom. He was in Double-A for us this past year. He's got 6.5 years of major league service, but at 34 years old in about a month, is not, in my mind, a big-time major league starter anymore. Cody Morton, you may remember, he's the outfielder that we picked up in a trade last year when we were looking at both him and Bonello. And Morton was pretty underwhelming in the few months that he was with our organization. Hit just 1 home run in 114 at-bats across AAA and the majors. Like him defensively in the outfield, like some of his personality traits, but Morton is in his last option year, and with the fact that we just picked up Bonello, and we already have Ortega, Lara, and Cabral as outfielders, there's no guarantees that Cody Morton was going to end up as our 5th outfielder. Last year we were using the younger Mr. Tavares in that spot instead. And we still have guys like Bertrand Albrighton and Isreber Stewart, who are also going to be out of options next season, who could be competing for utility spots on our team. So I don't love moving on from Morton and essentially admitting that that trade didn't really work out for us, but it's a sunk cost at this point. And I think it's unlikely that Morton was going to make our 26-man roster, so I'd rather get something for him. Even more painful than giving up Morton, perhaps, is giving up the right fielder Mike Finley, who was our 2nd-round pick in 2029. He combined for 28 homers and 77 ribbies in A and high A ball this year. Painful to potentially move on from him because he was a former 2nd-round pick. But looking at the fact he's going to be 23 years old soon and looking at his profile, I think best case scenario he profiles as a average corner outfielder, and realistically he's probably a fourth outfielder. So while he's got some value, we're going to move on from him. The other reason that we're including Finley is he will be Rule 5 eligible in about a month and a half when the Rule 5 draft happens, so we would have to put him on the 40-man roster to potentially avoid losing him for nothing. So the fact that he helped get this trade done, and I didn't necessarily want to use a spot on the 40-man roster for him, made me willing to throw him in. The guy that's certainly going to hurt the most, though, is Sam Bailey, a left-handed pitcher that we picked in the 4th round out of UNLV in 2030. Made his major league debut for us this past year, put up a 2.86 ERA for us. Really good across AAA and the majors this past season. A lot of positive personality traits. And he, interestingly, is also a lefty pitcher. He was the key to getting this deal done. If Bailey wasn't included, it was going to be one of the really top prospects in our organization, like an Arturo Uresti, to get the deal done. And I was not willing to pay that fee. So comparing Bailey to Lambert, Lambert, the guy we'd be getting in return, is about 4 months younger. And you can see when we look at the stuff potential, Lambert is higher. Movement is the same. Home runs allowed are the same. BABIP, Lambert's a little higher. And control, they're pretty similar. The top end of Lambert's pitches are a bit better than the top end of Bailey's pitches, although Bailey's got a more expansive repertoire with 6 pitches rather than 4. Lambert throws a little bit harder. It's certainly not an overwhelming lead for Lambert over Bailey. But there's also no guarantees that either of these guys improves at all from where they are today, given that they're both 25 years old. And when we kind of compare where they are today, Lambert stands out there as well, where he's better in stuff and BABIP, and they're the same in everything else. Lambert slightly better defensively, but we are comparing guys that are very similar, and I freely admit that. Lambert's stamina and holding runners ratings are fine, but to be fair, Bailey with a little more stamina, and he's better at holding on runners. So I think we're getting the best player in the deal. In fact, I don't think it, I believe it. I would say that I know we're getting the best player in the deal when all is said and done. But given that Lambert is maybe 5 or 10% better than Bailey, I could see people thinking that including Finley and Morton in the deal to get a player that's only 5 or 10% better is a high price to pay. I get that point. I can't argue with the point if some of you feel strongly about it. I think, though, what puts me into the point where I want to do this deal is that I am getting the best player out there. And as we talked about earlier, Finley is going to be need to be added to the 40-man roster in a month, or we could lose him for nothing. and Morton is going to need to be on the 26-man roster coming out of spring training next year, or we could lose him for nothing. And I don't think Morton makes our 26-man roster next year, and I'd prefer to not have Finley take up a spot on the 40-man roster right now for us either. So there's definitely some forward-looking roster management involved in this transaction. I think it's conceivable that this trade could look bad for us when we look at the WAR generated by all of these players over time. Since although I believe Lambert's going to be a bit better than Bailey over the course of his career, it's not inconceivable that Morton or Finley will add more than enough WAR to make it a negative WAR trade for us from that perspective. But given that of guys who we want to be on our 40 and 26-man rosters a year from now, Bailey and Lambert are the only two guys that meet that criteria. I think it makes sense to go ahead and get this deal done. So Bailey, Finley, Morton, and Rom are headed to Tampa Bay, and Mike Lambert, good young left-handed starting pitcher, is joining our team in Oakland. The fans also excited about Lambert. I actually had not mentioned that, something I had looked at between episodes when we were talking about it that was a point in his favor. We actually got a 3-point boost. He was a lot more popular than I had thought, given that we only got a 1-point boost from re-signing a proven major leaguer like Jackson Ferris. But I don't think I had mentioned that when I was kind of going through the pros and the cons, but it had been something that was in the back of my mind when I was looking at the 4 pitchers between the last episode and this one that had slipped my mind till we got that nice bump in fan interest. So that hopefully will help us with the finances a little bit to get that 3-point bump in fan interest. And Mike Lambert is now on our major league roster, and we've made a pretty significant trade, and we've definitely made some pretty significant moves to our 40-man roster with the 3 trades that we've already made. And as we've talked about, the pending departures that are likely of Burns, Manzardo, and Nardi are also going to take some pretty significant talent off of this Oakland A's roster. And we've made it now to the start of the awards season, and despite some really good pitching and defense for the Oakland A's this past season, no Gold Glove winners for the A's. Some familiar names and some new names among the Gold Glove winners. Mackenzie Gore still plugging along at the age of 34 with the Royals now, wins a Gold Glove. Catcher Cannon Peebles of the Toronto Blue Jays looks like a pretty good two-way catcher who won a Gold Glove this year and was also an All-Star this season. First full year in the majors, I guess, since he did play a couple games in Buffalo in 2032. Actually, that's not true. He's been in the majors for 5 years, but a pretty good offensive player with a pretty good glove as well. Jorge Toledo of the Baltimore Orioles wins his second Gold Glove at first base. Guy that had 200 hits and hit over 300 a year ago. PJ Mutsaraitis, the Gold Glove winner at second base for the Texas organization. Not much of a bat, but a pretty good-looking glove, and he is now a multi-time Gold Glove winner. Third baseman Nacho Alvarez Jr. from the Tampa Bay Rays certainly has a Gold Glove type third base profile, although this is the first one for the now 30-year-old. He's been a pretty solid hitter over the years, above average offensive player at least each of the last 3 seasons. fragile physically at this point. Julio Del Campo, shortstop for the Mariners, wins his first Gold Glove at the age of 26. Not much of a hitter, but certainly tries to make up for it with a really nice glove. Jazz Chisholm, current Yankee in real life, wins his first Gold Glove as a left fielder for the Twins. Batted just 207 this year, so he's been a below-average offensive player the past few seasons. Don't know that most teams would be playing someone who's that poor offensively in left field if they had other options, despite the fact that he did just win a Gold Glove. Center fielder from the Guardians, Steve Ippolito, wins the third Gold Glove of his career. He's a former Rookie of the Year from a couple of years ago. Looks like a pretty good offensive player. It's combined with excellent defense. Some negative personality traits, and hasn't come close to repeating the 6.3 WAR he had as a rookie. And Dylan Carlson for the Minnesota Twins at the age of 35 just won his first Gold Glove at right field. Another guy who was slightly below average offensively, so he certainly provided more with the bat than Chisholm did, but probably still would prefer to have your right fielder generating more offense than Carlson did. Again, Why Me 943 was just kind of asking us to share some of the highlights of some of the better players involved in the league. So that's why we're spending a little more time on some of the award winners this year, just to hopefully give you a better lay of the land as to what the league looks like here a decade after we started this series. In the National League, Bryce McCaggy of the Nationals has won a fourth consecutive, or I guess I don't know if it's consecutive. Yes, it is consecutive. Fourth consecutive Gold Glove as the starting pitcher for the Nationals. Was 14-10 with a sub-4 ERA this year. He's actually a pitcher who we looked at potentially making a trade for, but he's a little older than ideal. He's going to be 29 when the season starts, and also making more money than we'd prefer. Ethan Salas, excellent catcher for the Padres organization, almost perfect defensively, captain personality, and we also hit 28 homers and 80 ribbies this year. He's put up a WAR of above 4 for at least 3 consecutive seasons now, and actually for 6 consecutive seasons after breaking in as a 22-year-old. Actually broke in as a 19-year-old in 2025. Wow. So Salas has had quite a career after being signed as an international free agent by the Padres in early 2023. Brett Harris, first baseman for the Nationals, longtime Los Angeles Dodger, guy we had thought about picking up in a trade a few times. Solid offensive player, and although he's no longer really good at second, third, or shortstop, a pretty proficient defensive first baseman, wins his first Gold Glove. Devin Saltaban of the Atlanta Braves is your Gold Glove winner for the National League at second base. Not the greatest offensive player in the world. You may remember he was briefly with us a year ago. We traded him away this past offseason. And that 2.8 WAR, given his good glove, pretty impressive. But obviously we went into a different direction at second base with Mr. Estrada this year. Joe Wooden, third baseman for the Giants, 24-year-old, already a Gold Glove winner and an All-Star, and he hit 287 with 35 homers and 116 ribbies this year. First full year in the majors, but he did have over 300 at-bats in 2032, so he's not going to be eligible for the Rookie of the Year award. Otherwise, with a 5.1 WAR, would expect that Wooden would be a pretty strong candidate. Alex Harrington of the Phillies, excellent defensive shortstop with a real interesting bat. He was the 8th overall pick in 2026 and had a bit of an offseason offensively this year, but still put up a WAR of over 5 thanks to his good defense and 34 doubles, 14 homers, and 22 steals. Chris Scram of the Chicago Cubs is your Gold Glove winner in left field. Had a pretty nice offensive season for the Cubs this year. Gold Glove center fielder Brando Mayea of the Pirates. He has won 4 Gold Gloves in center field. Bit below average of an offensive player this year. 27, turned 28 in September, but is able to steal a few bases and leg out some doubles, as well as play very good defensive center field. And your Gold Glove winning right fielder is Brady Harris for the Washington Nationals. He was the Rookie of the Year a couple years ago, adds a Gold Glove into his trophy case this year. He also had over 30 homers and over 100 ribbies while putting up a WAR of 3.6. So a relatively quick look at some of the best fielders in baseball. We'll also spend a little time with some of the other awards just to, as I said, give you a little bit better understanding of some of the top players in the game today. And who knows, maybe some of you will identify a guy that we should go pursue in the trade market in the coming seasons. The Mariano Rivera Awards were announced today. Brett Renfroe of the San Diego Padres, who was the rookie of, he was a Wild Card Series MVP this year, and he adds the Mariano Rivera Award to that. 37 saves and a 2.47 ERA for the Padres closer. Jeremy Lowe of the Pittsburgh Pirates, 27-year-old lefty, also got some votes. Only 13 saves, but he did also win 7 games and had a very strong sub-2 ERA over 70 and 2/3 innings pitched. Gregory Santos, the 34-year-old, should be a bit of a familiar name, I believe. 38 saves, was the tops in the National League, even though he finished 3rd in the Mariano Rivera Award voting. He was a guy who, those of you who may remember our mini-series that we did with the Seattle Mariners before we started this long play with the Oakland A's, Santos was a somewhat controversial pitcher at times for us during that mini-series. Turning to the American League, a lot of guys received first place votes. The winner of the Mariano Rivera Award, Joshua Reitnauer of the White Sox, 41 saves and a 2.08 ERA. Mike Olson of the Cleveland Guardians got 9 first place votes, 5 wins, 5 saves, but a sub-2 ERA over 52 and 2/3 innings. Looks like the guys with really good ERAs do get a fair amount of support for this award. Gregory Soto of the Yankees split the year between Tampa and the Yankees, combined for 21 holds, which was a league-leading number, but actually no saves, but a sub-2 ERA with Tampa and a sub-3 ERA with the Yankees for the veteran left-hander. Eli Morgan of the Texas Rangers, their closer, got some votes. He led the American League with 47 saves, had a 2.95 ERA, but clearly was not the most popular vote getter as far as earning the Mariano Rivera Award. He is a guy who was an all-star in 2027, and he won major league championships in 2024, 2025, 2030, and 2033 in this world. So he has been a pitcher on a lot of winning teams, back-to-back with Cleveland, and then also on Cubs and Rangers World Series championship teams. And fifth in the voting was our guy Levi Sterling. We talked about him earlier, especially with the fact that we now have Ferris signed, and we just made the trade for another left-handed starting pitcher. I think we will intend to use Sterling as a stopper next year. He started 9 games for us this year. Also spent some time as the closer, where he picked up 9 saves, 10-6 record with a 3.10 ERA, and almost 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. Really looking forward to seeing what Sterling can do next year, when we're hoping maybe we get 130 plus innings out of him in a high volume stopper role. And it'll be a little easier for us to go through the Silver Slugger winners for each league, since you can see the stats of the players on the page here. Ethan Salas, interestingly, a perennial Gold Glove Award winner, although he didn't actually win. He did win one this year. I was like, yeah, that name sounded familiar. And wins his first Silver Slugger here at the age of 27, but he is off to an incredible start in his career with the Padres organization. Looks like a potential future Hall of Famer. Steve Flatt of the Phillies has been one of the top offensive players in baseball for the past few years. Wins a third Gold Glove or third Silver Slugger of his career at second base. Adael Amador of the Rockies organization, a third Gold Glove for him, or Silver Slugger for him at second base. If I could speak about what I want to speak about, the 30-year-old is wrecked physically, but still a perennial 300 hitter and 6+ WAR guy for the Rockies organization. Joe Wooden of the Giants organization, we talked about him earlier, won his first Gold Glove, his first All-Star Award, and his first Silver Slugger here in his first full year in the majors. He could be a very interesting player going forward. He was the 4th overall pick just 2.5 years ago. Shoji Bame of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Silver Slugger at shortstop. I don't know that I would deal with that glove at shortstop, but clearly the Dodgers chose to, and were rewarded with over 40 homers and over 100 ribbies from the player that we flirted with in international free agency a couple of years ago. Armand Caprioglio, center fielder from the Diamondbacks organization, 22-year-old, All-Star for the first time this year, as well as a Silver Slugger award. Another guy who played too much the previous year to qualify as a rookie this year, but with a .324 average, 27 homers, and 109 ribbies, as well as 34 doubles, 7 triples. Capriolio looks like he could be a very good player for many years to come. Kevin Alcantara from the Los Angeles Dodgers, Silver Slugger in the outfield, led the league with 44 homers and 118 ribbies this year. Jorge Rangel of the Brewers led the league with 210 hits and 57 doubles while hitting .334. Had a monster season in right field. And Yordan Alvarez, still plugging along at 36 years old, is wrecked physically, but played enough as a designated hitter, even though he only had 121 games. His .304 average, 31 homers, and 89 ribbies earned him the 4th Silver Slugger of his storied career. Over in the American League, Cannon Peebles of the Blue Jays. Interestingly, both of the catchers won both Gold Gloves and Silver Sluggers in each league this year. So Cannon Peebles, nice year for the Blue Jays. Brad Penny, first baseman of the Astros. This is a guy who was drafted in 2027, 9th overall by the Astros, and .288 average, 30 homers, 92 ribbies this year. Jackson Holliday, a familiar name there in the Baltimore Orioles organization, led the league with 125 runs, 42 steals, 412 on base percentage, 972 OPS, 158 WRC plus, and a 7.9 WAR. He is a perennial all-star and has now earned the 5th Silver Slugger of his career. Another former Oriole, who fortunately now is a Yankee, Gunnar Henderson, your Silver Slugger at third base after a 36 home run, 118 ribby season for the Bronx Bombers. Bobby Witt Jr., your Silver Slugger at shortstop, led the AL with a 311 batting average as well as 8 triples this year for that very strong Kansas City Royals team. Wyatt Langford, who is having an absolutely monster career. Happy birthday, Wyatt, 32 years old today. Another monster season for the Texas Rangers, led the league with 134 ribbies and a slugging percentage of close to 600. You can see he is a 4-time MVP and a perennial all-star and Silver Slugger. Eric Craig of the Blue Jays is your Silver Slugger in center field, tied for Witt for the league lead with 8 triples and led the AL with 617 at-bats. Juan Molino, your right fielder from the Texas Rangers, a 24-year-old. He's probably going to be your Rookie of the Year winner in the American League. He's already won an All-Star award. He just got named a Silver Slugger, as we know, and he won the World Series with Texas while hitting .290 with 39 homers and 120 ribbies as a rookie. Also has that perfect personality. He was picked 16th overall in 2031. And last but not least, Woody Toop, Earthquake Toop. 38 homers and 88 ribbies to go with a .286 average and earn the Silver Slugger at designated hitter for the American League this year. And as we anticipated, Juan Molina of the Texas Rangers adds a Rookie of the Year award to his All-Star, Silver Slugger, and World Championship honors. Interestingly, though, the second and third place voters, or the second and third place finishers in the voting for the American League Rookie of the Year are both Oakland A's right now. Elliot Bonello, who we traded for at the start of this episode, finished second in the voting and is now a member of our A's. And Sergio Estrada, the second baseman that we talked about, put up an 87 WRC plus and a 2.4 WAR for us after joining our team as an international free agent. So although we didn't have the best rookie in the American League this year, with Bonello and Estrada, hopefully we've got a couple of youngish players who can help this offense going forward. Over in the National League, Steve Carpenter, also a unanimous winner. 303 average, 24 homers and 86 ribbies while putting up a 5.2 WAR while playing shortstop is generally going to probably win the Rookie of the Year in most seasons. And the real big awards have now been handed out as well. American League Cy Young Award winner Mackenzie Gore. We talked about him earlier. He won his second Gold Glove this year, but that will pale in comparison to his first Cy Young Award. 19-4 with a league best 2.89 ERA, over 200 strikeouts for that very strong Kansas City staff. So 34-year-old first-time Cy Young Award winner. Congratulations to Mackenzie Gore. Alfredo Magana of the Yankees, starting pitcher, 16-8, who led the league in games started, innings pitched, walks per 9, strikeout to walk ratio, 77 FIP minus, and a 5.8 WAR. Finished second in the voting at the age of 29. Three of our Oakland A's got Cy Young Award votes this year. Jackson Ferris, who we've re-signed, Chase Burns, who will likely be leaving, and Jamie DeVore, who joined us this past offseason, got votes. Jeremy Seabright of the Toronto organization, 8-9, but with a 3.36 ERA and a 4.8 WAR, finished third in the voting. Steve Tudor of the Kansas City Royals, who's off to a fantastic start at the age of 25. Already has 2 Cy Young Awards and 2 All-Star appearances. Season was cut short by a partially torn labrum in mid-August. He was 14-8 with a 3.01 ERA and 187 strikeouts and a 5.8 WAR with a month and a half to go in the season when that happened. So if not for that injury, it's possible that Tudor would have had a third Cy Young Award. Our former pitcher, Jai Watterson, who led the AL this year with 21 wins, also got some Cy Young votes. Over in the National League, a unanimous winner, Ishmael Carrera of the Padres, 13-9. But as you can see, led the league in a ton of categories. Games started, innings pitched, strikeouts, ERA, WHIP, strikeout to walk, quality start percentage, FIP minus, and a 7.4 WAR. So a fantastic season for the 25-year-old Ishmael Carrera. He was actually another one of those pitchers in his mid-20s that we looked at, but not surprisingly, the price for Mr. Carrera was prohibitive to try to pick him up in a trade. Jacob Misiorowski, who we traded away several years ago, continues to perform very well as a starter for the Rockies, wins 14 games for the third consecutive year, led the league in walks for the third straight year, but also led the league in strikeouts per 9 innings for a third straight year. Trading away Misiorowski, certainly probably one of the worst trades that we've made in this playthrough. Paul Skeens, who is now of the Mets, got some votes this year. 7-4 record over 18 starts with Milwaukee, and then they sent him to the Mets, where it looks like the Mets used him as a middle reliever. 1 win and 3 saves in 22 outings for him. So kind of an interesting move there, but the Mets did make the playoffs this year, so it all worked out. Skeens, certainly his profile now is not what fans of the Pirates and fans of what he's doing in the early stages of his career would expect it to be. Taking a look at his major league career, he's got a 67-82 record with a 4.61 ERA in this imaginary world. So certainly not the type of career that either Skeens or the Pirates are expecting here in August of 2024 in the real world. And a lot of familiar names that we've already talked about at the top of the AL MVP award voting. Jackson Holliday wins the award, first MVP of his career. Wyatt Langford second in the voting as he was trying to win a 5th MVP. Juan Molina, Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt Jr. also received votes. Jake Ortega, the top Oakland A's vote getter. Joe Edwards of Kansas City, a guy that we thought about in the draft several years ago, also getting some attention. Colt Keith from our Oakland A's organization with another 100-plus ribby season also got some votes. Looking at the National League, again, a lot of familiar names that we've already talked about here. Steve Flatt edges out Kevin Alcantara to win the award. Walker Jenkins, no first place votes for the right fielder from the Marlins, but still with that .321 average, 26 homers and 97 ribbies, finished third in the voting. Brad Hunt, also of the Marlins, center fielder, who won a Gold Glove 4 years ago at this point, led the National League with a .356 batting average and put up a 6.5 WAR. 50 doubles, 9 triples, 11 home runs from a pretty dynamic offensive season for Mr. Hunt. We already talked about Amador, Capriolio, Shohei Bamai, Michael Harris II, still knocking around at the age of 32. over the course of his career. He's closing in on 2,000 hits, closing in on 300 home runs. Definitely has had some injury issues over the years. Has played over 150 games in a season just once since 2027 and is wrecked physically at the age of 32, soon to be 33. So I know that may have been more detail than some cared for about, in this case, many fictional baseball players and a completely fictional baseball universe. Not the most action-packed, detailed, and a lot of statistics and me talking about numbers for those of you who are looking to fall asleep. But as I mentioned, was a request from longtime viewer, frequent commenter, and important member of the Worldwide Scouting Department, YME943, to give people a little bit of the lay of the land of some of the top players who are out there in this world, and also a little information on how some of today's superstars' careers have evolved. So I hope that was interesting to some of you. Probably won't go into this kind of detail in the awards season every year, though. And we've simmed ahead a few more days. We are now on the brink of free agency. No surprise that both Chase Burns and Kyle Manzardo declined their qualifying offers and will be becoming free agents. So we will be moving on from both of those players. The hope is that by bringing back Mr. Ferris, by adding Mr. Lambert into the organization, and by making the trades for the catcher Chris Laughlin, as well as the outfielder Elliot Bonello, we'll be able to hopefully successfully replace some of the pitching skill and some of the offense that we will be missing out on next year with the pending departures of Misters Burns and Manzardo. And before we take a look at the free agents here in Major League Baseball, we'll take a quick look at the international free agents, see if there's anyone who piques our interest as someone we may want to spend a little more time and resources getting to know. Reliever Juan Aguayo out of Cuba. Incredible movement and control on his pitches, but his arsenal is not particularly impressive. I don't think we'll be looking to pay him $4 million. Gilberto Casado, another reliever out of Cuba, a much more balanced profile here for the lefty. Does look like he could be a borderline starter with that decent-ish curveball. Looking for about $19 million a year, though. Probably not a direction that we would go. Closer Naoki Sato out of Japan looks like a potentially really big-time pitcher. Only low scouting accuracy on him, but the soon-to-be 28-year-old throws triple digits, has really good stamina for a reliever. Outstanding stuff with that world-class fastball and excellent slider, and we believe plus movement and plus control. Don't know that we can afford to go $16 million a year for Penguin Sato, but certainly a very impressive-looking closer. And last, but probably not least, Yukio Fukushima, left fielder, left-handed hitting guy with decent power, decent eye. The 30-year-old will be turning 31 early next year. Probably not someone we're going to spend a ton of time looking at. Taking a look at the actual free agents, pitching-wise, Sato stands out as the highest rated. Burns, Class A, and Graterol also some of the more prominent pitchers who are going to be available. I think it's unlikely we're going to be huge players in free agency, but with the moves that we've made, we do have the opportunity to play a little bit if there's guys that we think can help our team. Taking a look at the top position players on the market. And Mr. Amador, who we just spent some time talking about, Nacho Alvarez Jr. as well, along with Christian Serta, Cam Collier, our guy Kyle Manzardo and Blake Mitchell are some of the top guys available. A couple of our former players in Diane Jorge and Drake Baldwin also on the market, along with the likes of Kevin Alcantara, Drew Gilbert, and Gabriel Moreno. So some interesting names going to be available in free agency this year. I don't tend to think we're going to be huge players, but we probably do have a spot or two we could fill on our pitching staff, and who knows if there's a big time catcher or a big time middle infielder who ends up being available at a reasonable price. You never know if it might make sense for us to get involved down the line, but I think at least initially we're probably going to be relatively modest players in free agency, as we've tended to be in most cases of this playthrough. Some interesting names on the trade block at this point. Marcelo Meyer, a guy who we had thought about picking up over the last year or two to hopefully play shortstop for us, is now being shopped by Tampa again. Before we finish off the episode, we'll take a very quick look into the development lab, see how things are going, and they are not going well. We've got a lot of frustrated and struggling players. Only Shiloh Solis is on track about a month into these development programs with his quality of contact program. You can see that we went with a somewhat more difficult batch of programs than we normally do. Only 3 of them were relatively easy. The pitching programs that Pennyman, Mangano, and Raphael were working on, and all of them are frustrated right now as well. So certainly not going incredibly well for us in the early stages of the development lab this year, but fortunately we've got another 2 to 3 months until we'll get those final results. Would definitely be a bummer to have only 1 out of 10 programs be successful when all is said and done, but a lot can change between now and the end of the programs, and a lot's going to be changing in the next episode because we're going to be likely participating in the Rule 5 draft. Perhaps we'll make some free agent offers, may make another trade or two, and we'll also be getting prepared for the upcoming international amateur free agent period. So next time around, it'll be another busy episode here at Old School Sports. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.